let me count. Can I count us in? I know we're live already, but
Let's do it. Let's do it.
5, 4, 3, 2,
1. You're done when I see you,
my brother. It is out the box. It is your man Westerfield Tolbert with a mind of valor.
and it's your guy, your man, your God, Don Dada, aka Don Julio. Make you holla, you know what I'm saying? You heard me?
And, you know, we are incredibly humbled to be back here in the studio once again with you. It's been some time. It's been almost 3 months, Don, I think, since we...
Well, you know what? A lot has happened. We've got a lot to talk about. But yes, it has been almost 3 months since we've been able to engage with you lovely people. So, you know what? Consistency is something that I'm big on. So I definitely want to apologize and want to try to keep this thing going and moving and picking it back up.
Yeah, we ain't mean to leave y'all high and dry like that, but life be lifing and
Forgive
personalities be popping and the seasons was changing, sundresses was out, all kind of stuff was happening. The Lord was protecting us, but the devil sent every distraction that he could muster. But, you know, we made it out. We made it through. We're back in the studio with you today. For
the BBLs
show.
were BBLing.
You know what I'm saying? Like, golly, what is a man supposed to do?
Yeah. Try to stay structured, disciplined, and focused. And, you know, getting into the show topic today, that's what we're going to be talking about today.
You know, and today we were thinking, and we decided that the most necessary subject that we are both dealing with in the present moment is what we've titled the push and pull of masculinity.
Yes.
Now, what brings us to this conversation in this moment is just our reflection on the relationships with our male sons and just the ebbs and flows of them going into maturation, becoming teenagers, reflecting on our own teenage years, and just figuring out how to engage them. Now, when we say the push and the pull, it comes to us that when we try too hard to engage them or fight too hard to create relationships, they seem to flee from us. You know, they want to do their own thing. They want to establish their own identity and personality, and they don't necessarily want to be like their dads.
Oh, well, nowhere near. Like, I literally had my son, who's 16 years old. My oldest is 16. And my I have 3 sons, you know, 2 daughters, 5 all together. But my 2 oldest sons, my oldest son, he's 16, like I was saying, and he thinks I'm not cool. He just will literally tell me, like, yeah, Dad, you're not cool. He doesn't want to be around me. And this hurts my feelings, but I had to understand, like, yeah, I'm not your friend. I'm your father. So, you know, I expect a certain type of respect and a certain type of output from him.
Consideration.
And when I don't get that consideration, it's almost like I get mad and I become defensive. And it's like, okay, how to not push so much on your child to where they don't want to reciprocate to you, you know, but not allowing them to, not being slacking on them so much to the point to where you're perceived as being their friend.
Yeah, can I just throw a little slice of something in there? Because in my experience, it's not so much the that they don't want to engage us. It's almost like the antithesis. Like, they want to go above and beyond to demonstrate their independence or their rebellious nature. And I can recall being a young man, and I understood my rebellious nature, because I'm going to tell you right now, I was a bit of a wild boy. Thank God I survived. Thank God my mother's prayers and the ancestors came through, and I didn't go so many ways. I only got 2 kids, and you know what I'm saying? My scars are deep, but they're not many, thank God. But so I can empathize with why he might want to do what he does, right? But for me, I feel like it was different. I lived in a different world. There was different distractions. There was different threats. When you have a plush existence and you still want to be objectionable and contrary, see, that's where I have the issue.
Well, you know, and once again, it comes about the home that we're creating and the women that we create our children with. And I know for me, I've never been married, but I've got 2 different baby mamas. And that for me is something that I have to say is a no-no. Now that I know, I didn't know that growing up. Hell, I didn't even want to be married. You know, I was like, man, I ain't gonna be married. Nigga, I'm pimping, you know what I'm saying? A whole mind, I keep a dime. Like, I really thought I was a pimp, you know what I'm saying? Like, a strong, pimp hand was strong on these hoes out here. But when I start having children and then I start getting into relationships with women that wanted to relate to me on a husbandry level, and I wanted a, you know, wife wiffery out of them, the dynamics of the relationship became construed, right? So I'm wanting to raise children in a situation. It's almost like you're trying to grow a plant in the desert. You need water. You need something like just all these different factors that you need to get this plant to grow. But if you don't grow this plant in a habitable environment, a positive environment, right? If you're not reinforcing the things that this plant needs, which is AKA your child, then it's not going to grow effectively and it's not going to produce, the fruit that you want, right? So I heard the saying that if you parent your children, you get a chance to be a grandparent. You can spoil your grandchildren. But if you spoil your children, then you'll have to raise
your grandchildren. Because right then and there, that tells me that the conversation we had earlier about what the opposite of accountability is shame.
It's shame.
And what we have is parents who want to be so much in the loop and get along with their children so well that they're willing to compromise, in certain instances, the relationship with the co-parent just to keep the pace and keep the peace with the child. And that there is where we have a lot of the issues. And I'm not saying it's only mothers who do it, because fathers do it too. And it comes in this expressions of overtly trying to buy children's affection and overcompensate for those wounds that they still haven't healed within themselves. And what happens is you create a dichotomy that ends up being a generational curse or a remedy that does not get solved in our present day. And we are, as men in our present day, solutions driven and trying to find solutions to heal our traumas, right? So when we are in partnership with people who aren't on that same journey to heal our generational traumas, yet we have to raise an intergenerational being together in tandem, it can pose problems.
Oh, big time. And just going back to what you were talking about, generational curses, my mother and my father didn't get married. So for me, what is the blueprint on what it looks like to actually marry a woman and raise a family? I come from a broken home, what you would call a non-traditional family, right? So that's something that, if you continue to keep on that same path and keep those same things going on, you're not going to bear fruit. You're not going to be able to grow into a positive, and change the dynamics of your ancestors, your descendants. It's so critical to be pursuing I don't want to get too religious when I say this, but a God-fearing relationship. Religion to me is a set of rules that a certain group of people choose to dictate or live their lives by at a certain point in time. That's why you have so many religions, right? But I understand the value of religious context when it comes to structuring yourself and your family. Like, I think it says in the Bible, he who findeth a wife
findeth a good thing.
So, in a sense, like, why didn't I get married to the mother of my children? Before I had children. Why didn't she put her standards down and say, before I'm going to have your children, you got to marry me. You've got to be at a certain precipice for yourself as a man in order for me to give myself to you. Right? But I wasn't thinking about that. I was that third leg was thinking for me. You know what I'm saying? That third head was thinking for that second head. And a lot of times that's what brings on the generational curses or keep them going, because in my instance, I did the same thing that my daddy did. I had children out of wedlock, and then I didn't, a lot of the women, a lot of times in my situation, didn't stick around, because of whatever reason, relationship issues, money issues, just, everyday things and stuff like that. But
we can present a compelling argument, because we've talked about us as men and our accountability, and how at the times we were in these relationships, we didn't show up as our full selves as men and our full supreme masculine. So we didn't even have the foundation to carry the relationships at that time.
Well, were you a husband? Before you had your children, were you a husband?
Obviously, I thought I was, but I wasn't, because I didn't make these women wives. Right? So I was on a journey playing a role that I actually wasn't qualified for, right? That's why these relationships broke up. That's why these homes broke up. And so instead of being ashamed of my choices, I take full accountability and responsibility for these choices. That's why I'm trying to sow better into my children and teach them the very things that I went through so they don't repeat the same mistakes. But if I'm the only one teaching these lessons and somebody else
My
is
point exactly.
overcompensating with
My
other
point
values, then the kid is lost.
Well, how like you said, how are these relationships going to blossom? And specifically, how are we going to blossom and bear fruit and get our children to bear the fruit that we want them to bear, right? If we're not reciprocating or setting a blueprint or an example. Like, we can't go back in and try to marry our baby mamas after the fact, because I'm gonna be honest with you, the mother of my children, they don't want nothing to do with me. I've caused a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. They're hurt. They've hurt me. I've hurt them, and it's to the point to where, how do we even be a family? You know what I'm saying? Because if we're not showing our children through the actual steps and the processes of walking it out and actually giving them a blueprint on, okay, hey, I seen my dad, buy flowers for my mom. I seen my dad, pay the bills, you know what I'm saying, and take care of me and my mom. And vice versa, you know what I'm saying? If they don't see your mom catering to your father, they don't see your mom cooking meals for your father, they don't see your mom taking care of your father and submitting to your father, and the man submitting to the woman, if they don't have that platform to go off of and that blueprint to go off of, then how do we create these blossoming relationships that we're looking for? And specifically, how do we get our children to blossom into the people that we want them to be? Because the fight and the pushback on us trying to create these situations and now trying to instill these husbandry qualities into these boys, into these whiffery qualities into these girls, but we don't have a blueprint that we're going off of. We're not even working off of a game plan. And that's what I feel is a lot of the pushback that we're getting, is because it's going to be like, okay, you tell me to go to school, right? You tell me to get a job. You tell me to respect my mama. You tell me to respect my father, but you're not doing that.
Can I present a caveat to that argument?
Please do.
Because my parents were together for over 30 years until my father passed away. And I still had questions about how a man should show up in present time with his children and in relationships.
Well, speak on that. Speak on that, because you coming from a parented home, you know what I'm saying, and actually seeing the marriage and seeing that dynamic, and you still not choosing to get married. Is it because of the society we in? Like what is it? What caused you and actually stopped you? Because I didn't have that, you know what I'm saying? I didn't have nothing to go off of, so I kind of reciprocated what was already, you know what I'm saying, played out to me, which was to literally pimp women, dog women, call women bitches, not respect women basically unless you're getting something from them, specifically sex. So how does that work out for you?
I would say that it put me at a disadvantage. Only because you have a wonderful example in your home, but then you quickly learn that outside of that controlled setting, the world is very different. So the dynamic that my parents shared with regard to resources, taking care of the children, shouldering the domestic responsibilities, it was very much unique to them. So my dad loved doing domestic stuff, like doing laundry, and in that same breath would be outside during yard work, and my mother just be in there knitting and chilling. And some days the roles will be flipped. My mama be out there mowing the lawn, and then
Wow.
It was never a thing where their gender roles were so constricted, right? And I think that part of that is because they were a young couple who ended up in the United States after just leaving a civil war in West Africa, right? And on another level, what they knew about parenting at that time, they were thrust into because they had a lot of kids at a young age. Right? And so there was no time for them to be like, okay, your gender role is this, my gender role is this. The thing was, we got to get this stuff done, because who's going to show up for us if we don't show up for ourselves? And they were against odds. And people looking at them, and they're a young couple. They got all these kids, and they're fighting to survive. Right? So they didn't really have the space to be anyone's punching bag, because they were too much each other's survival. They were each other's nourishment. It was an incubated space. But within that, the disadvantage that I saw, I could tell you that I never saw my parents argue. But with that, I never saw them reconcile either. Because me not seeing them argue or have disagreements and fights means that on the flip side, I don't see them making up from the arguments or making up from the fights. Everything just was a continuous stream of things got to get done. We just got to keep moving. And then when I experience the world and see divorce, and I learn about these different things that happen in real marriages, I realize that, my situation is it's unique for what it is. But the world was changing so rapidly that, like, I have this at home. Mind you, I was born in 87, grew up in the mid-90s. I graduated high school 2005. By 2006, we had social media. MySpace comes out in 2004, 2005.
So, do you think that with the introduction of the internet, do you think that's kind of been like a dumbing down in a sense of our relationships or our narratives and our capabilities to be able to reciprocate what our ancestors did, which was get married, have a home, own property, and things like that, because I would have those things as, things that you have to have, in order to have a relationship, right? Like even in the animal kingdom, a male, like for instance, we take a male lion. A male lion will have a certain amount of territory with gazelle, antelope, things to be able to feed the women that, he wants to procreate with, right? And so in our society, do we have our own homes? Are we making the finances and the money before we're, having children or even having sex, by these women? Because a lot of times sex is going to beget children. I don't care, like, if you're having sex, somebody gonna get pregnant, especially if you're not using a condom or you're not using protection. So, how is it that coming from a perspective of, for instance, for you didn't want to get married, like, or you have never been married?
It's fucked up.
Which one was it?
And it's fucked up. And excuse me, but I wanted to get married up until I met my baby mamas.
Damn.
And I mean that in no disrespect to them, because I hold them in a high regard with respect to where we are with each other. But what I experienced with them shown me that, first, I didn't know anything. I had to relearn relationships in a new environment, because, and this is where the internet comes into play, because with information, the most valuable information moves out in kind of like, it echoes in concentric circles, right? So right. It starts small, and then information gets more concretized, more information comes in, the circles get bigger, it spreads. With the internet and how we got introduced to the internet, you have these loops of information, right? Mm-hmm. So we get these narratives about how a marriage is supposed to be, what masculinity looks like, what toxic masculinity looks like, what a woman's movement looks like, right? But they're just in these loops. And so if for a second you enter a loop just trying to see some information, your algorithm might get caught in that, and then you're getting fed something, you're getting fed a narrative, you're getting fed information that may not be authentic, but you're being programmed with this thing, so you begin to think that this is what the world is like. When in reality, this is what your subsection of your algorithmic programming has illustrated you or projected to you. But people base their whole existence, their whole identities off of what the algorithm has presented them, which is not always authentic information. And most times it's manipulated information.
No. Facts. Like, I literally wanted to be Scarface because, I wanted to be a gangster, until I, got into a situation where I was incarcerated. And, I was talking to, a cellmate of mine's. And I was telling him that, hey, I wanted to be like Scarface, my whole life. He's like, yeah, you do know Scarface dies at the end of the movie. And I had never really put two and two together, and I never even peeped that. Like, yeah, he was, he was an immigrant, he come from nothing, but he sold dope, and he was able to make a whole bunch of money. And I was looking at the part that, I can make a lot of money, but I'm not going to be like Scarface. I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to get married and just have the perfect life and own a business and go about it that way, right? But I didn't look at the other underlying factor of the movie, which was he dies at the end of the movie and loses everything. And, the going in and out of jail, and then, those relationships with, the women. He had a toxic relationship. Even the movie in Johnny Depp, Blow, the movie Blow with Johnny Depp, that's a prime example. Like, he made a lot of money, had the perfect prize wife and everything, and she ends up turning this Negro, like it was his downfall.
Yeah.
So, understanding, like, it's almost like the Samson and Delilah story. For me, I didn't fully ever want to really marry a woman because that was never modeled for me. And the relationships that I had, my mom died when I was 5 years old. I don't even think I didn't meet my dad till I was like 13, So, I grew up, with my grandma until she had a heart attack, and a stroke. And literally, I was thrust into foster care because I was hurt. I was breaking in, robbing, stealing, killing, not killing, but stealing and, robbing people, burglarizing, missing school, just being truant, doing the most, right? So it was either go to camp or my father had to take, custody of me and I guess through guilt. Because it's not that he wanted to. It was kind of guilt tripped into, hey, either you take your son or, he's going to camp. He's going to be a, state property. So with that being said, the norm for me was to go by what society said women did. And I can remember watching the Fly Girls on Living Color, the Daisy Dukes, off Daisy off of Dukes of Hazzard, like the provocative, woman, women always, and then I'm an 80s baby. So, I'm an early 80s
MTV
baby.
generation. BT at the dark generation.
Come on,
a whole host of other things.
Come on now, I literally was watching movies like that were teaching me to objectify women. I wasn't watching movies that were teaching me to be in love with women, right? Even though I loved women and I wanted relationship with women, but I got my heart broken. I think I was about 14 years old and I was dating this female. I'm not going to say her name, but I used to buy her candies and chocolates and flowers and stuff like that. And, I was totally head and heel in love. You couldn't get me to look at another woman or cheat on this girl. Well, I went over to her house one day, chocolates, candy, and tow. And there's this guy. There's this other older guy. I think I may have been 14. He was maybe like 15 or 16. He was a little bit older, a few years older, right? And, he's just outside and he's just, kind of, I guess a neighborhood boy. I'm not really paying him no attention. Well, I go over her house, present her with the gifts and stuff like that. Her mom's not home. So, since she lets me up, we kiss, we make out and stuff like that. I'm feeling like I'm the man. Like, oh, I'm so in love. So I leave her house.
It was just appointment.
Oh my goodness. So the guy catches me on the bus because I caught the bus over to her house. And the guy, he sees me. And he walked, young kid, right about my age, you know what I'm saying? He walks up to me, he's like, hey, whoop-de-whoop. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, are you her, what are you, her boyfriend? I'm like, yeah. So he starts laughing. And I'm like, wow, what's up, bro? How do you know her? He's like, do I know her? He's like, bro, I seen you walking with flowers and gifts and stuff like that, bro. He's he's like, bro, I'm going to tell you like this. I'm fucking her too. And I'm like, to myself, I'm like, I'm not even fucking. She keeps telling me, no, I can't have sex with you. I want to save myself from marriage. And at 14, I'm like, I'm not even getting any play besides being able to kiss. I'm not even getting no skin. I'm just getting kisses. But I'm coming with chocolates and gifts and roses. I'm giving her money. I'm paying for us when we go out to the movies and stuff like that. I'm doing all this stuff.
So you getting her all fluffed up and he's knocking it down.
No, he's knocking it down. So I'm thinking to myself, nah, bro. Not my girl. Not my girl. No, he's like, bro. So her sister is whoop whoop. Her mom is whoop whoop. She's got this picture in her room. She's got this dress hanging up on her wall. Whoop de whoop. When he broke it down like that, my heart just dropped because I knew he wasn't lying. I'm like, no, you've been to her room. You know her mama. You know her sister. Nigga, you've been in her room. If this stuff isn't true, how have you been in her room? How would you know this stuff?
He got in your head.
So when I go back to her, this is what I did to prove whether or not he was lying. I just simply asked her a question. Do you know this guy? I went home, called her. I asked her, hey, so whoop, 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 just casual conversation. So, hey, do you know a guy named whoop-de-whoop-whoop-whoop? No. No? She's like, no, I don't even know that guy. She lied to me. So now I know that he's telling me the truth because she don't even want to tell me that she knows this guy. This guy knows her whole family. How does he know her whole family?
Did not know her.
And know what her room looked like, know what dress she got hanging up on her wall, what picture she got hanging up on her wall. But she don't even know him. So this is what kind of caused me and led me down this pathway of understanding the trickery of women. And once that happened to me, it set something off in me to where I looked at all women like that. So I started to look at, pimping and like how to have, control over that situation. I never wanted to feel that way again. I never wanted to feel played by a woman again, right? Because I felt like an L7. I felt like an L7, like straight up off top.
And that's the push and pull that we're speaking about in masculinity that wants us to show up authentically to protect and serve women, but it's also pulling back because we feel like we can't trust, and if we can't be safe in spaces, how can we protect those very spaces?
And for our boys as well, because pushing that onto our boys and not wanting our boys to feel that way about women, right? Because we want to build strong, confident men that are in loving relationships with the women that they choose, but there's a time and a place for that. And if we're not available in our mother of our children's lives to be able to reciprocate that and show our boys that this is the way that you treat a woman, I feel like that's where the generational curses come back in, and we're only passing down that trauma to our boys, and it's going to keep on being reciprocated.
Because who's programming into them that archetype? Who's demonstrating for them what healthy masculinity looks like? Who's presenting for them what reconciliation looks like? Who's representing for them what de-escalation looks like? What masculinity and femininity looks like in a healthy way.
And not in a toxic.
And not in a toxic way. They're once again sucked into the algorithm, or on the contrary, getting force-fed these identities from people who aren't even healed from their own trauma and don't even know what ills they're applying to these young men. They just know that at some time in their past, a masculinity did or didn't show up for me like this, and so I'm giving that all to this empty vessel so he doesn't show up in the world as such.
Yes.
But if the lesson that they got wasn't healthy, how can they force feed someone a healthy lesson? It's going to be toxic.
Well, I think that, one thing we have to do is we have to still try. And I think that more so than try, we can't fail ourselves, but we can't fail our children. No. So, teaching, the value of yourself, like teaching our sons to value themselves before having sex. Value yourself enough to not have sex and protect yourself and put yourself in a position where you can handle the responsibility that comes along with sex, which is children and a family. If you're not ready to have a family, then you shouldn't be having sex, first of all. Second of all, self-care and being able to take care of yourself, because you taking care of yourself and putting yourself in a financial position to where not only can you take care of yourself, but you can take care of a family is going to beget you being able to break those generational curses and being able to move into a place to where you can have a meaningful relationship with the woman instead of, trauma bonding. Because a lot of times you have trauma, the woman have trauma, and, it's almost like men, we simp over the pussy. You know what I'm saying? We become simps over the pussy, and we become simps to our women, and women don't want that, And guess what? A woman is going to take whatever you give them. Specifically, and I mean, if you're giving out negative energy, toxic energy, she'll take that too a lot of times,
and feed it right back to you,
and feed it right back to you,
amplify it.
And your children.
They'll take what we give them, they'll incubate it and amplify it back to us.
Facts. So, being able to, overstand and overcome, these obstacles is what I'm calling them, because, there's definitely a lot of obstacles that I have had to overcome. And I wish I would have had somebody to sit down and talk to me and show me the game first. But hey, you know what? That's here nor there. Moving forward in the conversation of, how to not, push too much on our children, but not how to, not fall back so far, to the point to where, and this is a great topic that I'm glad that we talked about because, wrapping things up, it's important for us to make sure that love, always, is let that be the guiding light, specifically self-care and self-love, taking care of yourself, valuing yourself, putting yourself first before you have sex. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And I think that this pushing and pulling and just narrating this conversation out loud has really made me to recognize that in order to the only way to not get pushed around is to be grounded. grounded in something, and it's best to be grounded in authentic love and in a healthy masculinity. That way you don't get pushed and pulled every time the wind blows. Be like bamboo. We bend, we don't break.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, you know what? That has been another great topic, you know what I'm saying, of Out of the Box show. If you like this, please, you know what I'm saying, like, share, you know, we love it, you know what I'm saying. And once again, we want to apologize for
subscribe too.
Yes, and subscribe. Yeah. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel.
Become part of the family.
Yes, please. And once again, I promise you, we will be doing this weekly. We'll be having these great topics and issues that we're going to be talking about, coming back to you. Once again, this is Don Julio, a.k.a. Donald McKinney, Family Bible owner, CEO.
This is Westerfield Tolbert with a mind of valor. Check us out. We're across all social media platforms. You can find us everywhere. Just use the Google button.
Yeah. Google me, baby.
Yes, sir. All right. Love y'all. Talk to y'all soon.